Hello everyone and welcome. I'm Nikki, and for those of you that are new here, my channel is dedicated to all things that have to do with literature. For everyone else who's already been here, it's so nice to see you again. Now most of the time I do book reviews, especially for indie authors or lesser known authors like myself. But today, however, I'm not going to do that. I want to talk to you guys about something from the writer's side of things, and that is going to be point of view, or POV. If you saw my video last week, I reviewed Underneath by M.N. Arzer, and I wasn't very happy with it, mainly because of how POV was executed. So today I want to talk about what it is, the different types, and why it's so important. Alright, so let's get started. Point of view is exactly what it sounds like. It's the perspective from which we're reading the book. POV is basically whose story is being told. Now there are 4 types to choose from. In first person, the character is telling their own story. This type of POV uses words like I or we or anything like that. This is the common narrative in YA novels such as The Hunger Games. It reads almost like the character's diary. So next is second person point of view. Second person has a narrator telling the reader's story. It plops you right in the middle of things, and it uses you a lot. The reader is an actual character within the book, and as such, you get your own dialogue, your own actions, things like that. An example of a second-person POV book would be one of those create your own adventures. I actually read one of those in junior high. It was Star Wars, Return of the Jedi, and it was something along the lines of you are on Endor with Luke, Leia, and Han. Luke is going to face Darth Vader on the Death Star, while Leia and Han stay and take out the shield generators. If you go with Luke, turn to page 394. If you stay with the others, go to page 12. It was pretty fun. I mean, I got to be a Jedi for a little while. So second person isn't very common, but it is unique in that it pulls the reader directly into the story. So then we have third person POV. Who would have guessed? Third person, the narrator is telling a character's story. It uses the character's names or pronouns, like he or she. Third person POV can be broken down into 2 distinctions. First is limited. Limited is from one character, or maybe a few characters' perspective. So even though they aren't the ones telling the story, you only see the things that they do, or you only know as much as them. There's also third person Omniscient, where the reader gets a broad scope of everything. This type can show multiple characters, thoughts, actions, and feelings in the same scene. I personally don't like Omniscient very much because I feel you don't get to connect with the characters in the same way that a limited POV does. Underneath sort of bled into this type of narrative more so than a limited point of view, and that's a big part of why I didn't like it so much. It was just too much stuff. Third person limited is the more common of these 2 types, and it's used in books like Harry Potter or in The Savior's Champion by Jenna Moreci. Okay, so what? Why is POV so important? Well, I'll tell you. Point of view is a central tool that writers use in storytelling. It guides the readers on what to feel and who the good guys and bad guys are. Everyone has a story, and as writers, it's our job to make sure that we're telling the right one. When you're telling a certain character's story, the audience automatically sees them as the hero. So we root for them. We care for this person. I'm going to use the Twilight series as an example here. In Eclipse, the 3rd one, the climax of the book is a battle between the Cullen family and a coven of newborn vampires that have been tricked into attacking them. At the end of this battle, we see one vampire that has given up. That's when you think she might actually get out of this alive. The real villains show up, and that's the end of her. Because this book is told from Bella's POV, we only see this other vampire for a second, and while you might feel bad for her and how things ended up, it's really no big heartbreak when she dies. However, there is a complementary novella called The Short Second Life of Bree Tanner, and that one follows this newborn vampire that we've met in Eclipse. You see Bree struggle with being a vampire and the lies and betrayals that have led her to this fight with the Cullens. Even though you know what her fate is going to be, after reading her story, you still kind of hope that somehow, beyond reason, she's going to be okay. So POV alters perspective, and it changes your feelings toward characters. So first you have to decide whose story it is that you're telling. Keep in mind that with first and third person, you can have more than one main character. Just don't overdo it. A lot of adult romances use third person limited, where one chapter will be the male love interest POV, and then the next chapter will be from the females. So you do have both these main characters, and you see what's going on in their heads and what they're doing, how the story affects them. You can also mix first and third person, but you have to be careful with how you use it. For example, first person can be one character's POV, and third person can be used for another character. You just have to be consistent. The Hush Hush Saga by Becca Fitzpatrick uses third person in the prologue, and then the rest of the book is first person narrative from a different character's perspective. So once you figure out who your main character is, you have to decide on which type you'll use to tell their story. The different types determine how the narrative flows. Personally, I really like using first person. When I'm writing in this type of narrative, I put myself directly in my character's head when I'm writing the dialogue, their reactions, and the exposition itself. I'll use words like wanna or gonna throughout the entire thing. However, my current work in progress is told from a third-person POV. I'm still in my main character's head for dialogue and what she would do, but the writing itself is cleaner. I don't use colloquialisms that I normally would. For this one, I'm just an outside narrator telling someone else's story for them. The tone that I use is completely different from the one that I used when I'm writing in first person. Okay, so here's something very, very important for writers to remember when it comes to POV. Ready? There is no right or wrong POV to use. It all depends on how you, as the author, want to tell the story. Like I said, I normally like first person, but that's just because I think readers connect more from this type. And really, that's just going off myself as a reader. I switched to a third-person POV for my current work in progress just because my main character goes through a lot of stuff in such a short period, and I wanted to show an outside view of how she grows throughout the course of the book. I totally could have done this in first person through her own eyes. For me, third person just felt like the better option to tell this character's story, simply because there's so many outside forces that are coming into play. A lot of external conflict versus internal conflict. So I could have gone either way, but I felt that third person would just help me drive this particular novel a little bit better than first person. You just have to keep it consistent in terms of whose story you're telling and the type that you're using to tell the story. If you're all over the place as the writer with the POV, so are your readers. Point of view is a key tool in shaping your readers' emotions. Alright, so that's it for today. Those are my thoughts on point of view. Thank you so much for joining me, and I really hope you enjoyed this video. If so, you can follow me on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Links are going to be listed down below in the description. And don't forget, I post new videos on Mondays, so subscribe and ring the little bell down there somewhere. And I will see you guys next time. Bye!